possibly one of the longest strikes in Gibraltar in history.
An extra long bank holiday, and as a result, hardly any Gibraltarians on our streets. But there are thousands of tourists. There's some cruise liners in town. It's really bizarre. It's almost as if we've swapped one population for another. And amidst all this, Unite, as usual, sticking to its guns. May Day, Workers' Day, is on the 1st of May, so they're celebrating May Day at the Piazza. And it all started with a march from Morrison's, where Unite members, Morrison's workers, have been holding protests and demonstrations every day for the last couple of months, complaining about a pay deal which was inadequate in their eyes. So they're marching from Morrison's and coming all the way to the Piazza, where the speeches kick off. Well, unsurprisingly, the costs of living crisis has dominated today's speeches, and the union has announced that it has received back the information from a report it commissioned looking into the affordability of a cost of living increase in the public sector.
Today I want to say a few words about an essential topic that has been in the public domain for a while now: public sector workers and Unite Economic Crisis Campaign. Unite the Union Executive Committee endorsed the Economic Crisis Campaign back in January 2022. Unite, through the Public Sector Branch Committee, has since been engaging with government in discussions and articulating the concerns of the majority of its members as a result of the rising inflation and cost of living crisis. Our public sector members are individuals who work for the government and provide essential services to the public. They include domestics, teachers, firefighters, nurses, doctors, amongst many others. The debate surrounding public sector workers has been ongoing, with some arguing that they are overpaid and have many benefits, while Unite, the union, argues that they are underappreciated and deserve a cost of living increase given the pay restraints during these past 3 years. They deserve it for the vital role they play in our society. They are the backbone of our education system, our healthcare system, our public safety, and more. Without these workers, our community could be less safe, less educated, less clean, and less healthy, and we would lack many things that we enjoy as a community. As a union, and in representation of the public sector members, it is our responsibility to analyze the data, research the facts, and present a comprehensive report of the situation, and that is what we've done. The commissioning of an independent body from the UK to assess the current state of Gibraltar's economy, GDP, public finances, public debt, COVID-19 effects, and government expenditure, to determine how all these factors relate to the current economic crisis. The question is, can government afford a pay rise for the public sector workers? Well, according to the recent economic report commissioned by the Office of the General Secretary, government can afford to borrow money for a public sector pay rise. Unite the Union, through its stewards, conveners, and industrial branch officials, has been working tirelessly attempting to instigate meaningful negotiations with government. To address the economic impact members are enduring stemming from last year's budget. After a year of lobbying, Unite had a breakthrough in the form of a commitment by government to engage with all unions during times of deficit by way of employer, trade unions, public sector, pay negotiating forum. An initial meeting has already taken place in preparation for the next year's budget. This will provide the Union with the ability to significantly influence the budget announcement and make effective representations for our public sector membership. It is necessary that as a strong Union, we meaningfully negotiate with government for the upcoming budget, with a clear objective of easing the current levels of hardship and suffering that many of our members and the community at large are experiencing. Considering the strong mandate received from our public sector membership during a recent ballot process, Unite the Union remains firmly committed to deliver a strong and positive result for our membership. Thank you, and carry on enjoying the day.
To unite the Union and the musician associations, May Day rally and celebrations on the 1st of May, which is the day it should be celebrated. Unite campaigned vigorously for the reintroduction of May Day on the 1st of May. And that's why we are celebrating it on the day it should be celebrated. Let's not forget the significance of the day, right? The struggles of our ancestors, the struggles of trade unions, and that is the reason we enjoy the terms and conditions, we enjoy what we have today. Thanks to all those, and we pay tribute to all of them. This year, we have carried out the largest in-scale democratic process in the public sector in Gibraltar for the last 20 years. More than 2,000 members of the public sector have been balloted in what I've said is the biggest democratic process. The overwhelming result in that ballot was overwhelming in what is an inflation crisis and cost of living crisis that we are all being faced with, and that is one of the themes of today, together with the Morrison's strike action. Last year, it was the 50th anniversary of the general strike. There are some parallels to be drawn today with the current cost of living crisis. Back in 1972, union members rejected a paltry pay offer. Union members voted in favor of a general strike, which lasted 5 days and resulted in an outstanding victory. The victory reignited trade unionism in Gibraltar. Inspiration can be sought with this poignant moment for working people, as can also with the Morrison strike action. Both actions shows the power of working people exercising their right to withdraw labour. I would like to pay tribute at this stage to our Morrison striking members. Who today I can say have been on strike action for more than 3 months. Even though Morrison's and the messages we were getting from inside the store is that the strike action and Unite will not be funding the striking members for more than 3 months. Pues lo hemos conseguido, lo hemos pasado los 3 meses. This tough dispute, but the solidarity in this is a tough dispute, but the solidarity shown is second to none. Our brave members have confronted an employer on fair pay, and Unite has demonstrated its full support to its members. We have seen international solidarity with Unite in the UK demonstrating outside the Morrison's main store. We have also seen other colleagues in the UK supporting the Unite Gibraltar Morrison's striking fund, and we have received thousands and thousands of pounds in support of you guys, of the striking workers in Morrison's. The reality is that it's make more news in the UK that is made in Gibraltar, and that needs to be said, because the support we are getting from UK and the messages of support is continuous and overwhelming. Today, I use this platform to praise our members and highlight the courage shown by men and women taking strike action and call on Morrisons to do the right thing and come back to the table. We need to find a solution to this dispute, and Unite is willing to engage, but it's Morrison that needs to listen and needs to come back to the table. O para terminar, nada más que darle las gracias a los compañeros que han venido de España, darle las gracias a todos ustedes, a todo el mundo que ha venido aquí a apoyar. Como he dicho, el Día del Trabajador se tiene que celebrar en el Día del Trabajador. No vamos a cambiar más y vamos a hacer lo posible para que nunca más se cambie el Public Holiday para que se celebre en otro día. Se tiene que celebrar en el Día del Trabajador, ¿vale? Y solo decir, hay que seguir la lucha trabajadora, hay que seguir luchando. Y solo digo una cosa más, hasta la victoria siempre y Happy International Workers' Day.
A large contingent of the supporters in the crowd today were in fact Morrison's workers. So again, unsurprisingly, this dominated the themes of the speeches we heard today. It's now 3 months since they started their strike action.
Hello, brothers and sisters. Thank you for coming today. It's been a year since, of course, we last met, and what a year it has been. We've seen action in the airport last summer, the current dispute at Morrison's, and the largest public sector ballot in Gibraltar in over 20 years. We know that workers across Gibraltar, across all sectors, and indeed the wider world, are suffering from a cost of living crisis. We are told by some that the cause for such high levels of inflation is made by those demanding higher wages. This, of course, is not the cause. The cause lies with those who will not offer workers a fair deal. And we know that power will give nothing without demand, and our message today is clear on our day: enough is enough. COVID and Brexit before that have been convenient excuses, but of course have had some economic issues along the way. But there was many economic issues faced in Gibraltar long before these issues came about. MOD workers in Gibraltar have faced the indignity of austerity wages long before anyone had a COVID vaccine and long before anyone was a Brexiteer or a Remainer. For 15 years and more, wage restraint and bad pay deals continue to hurt the pockets of MOD workers in Gibraltar, and we will be seeking clear commitments that this does not happen in the future. Brothers and sisters, in the private sector, we see too often the improper use of insecure, zero-hour contracts as well as low pay. However, there have been examples that not just give us hope, but demonstrate what can be achieved when workers stick together in solidarity. Last summer, workers at Gibraltar took action together fighting for fair pay and got exactly that. And I have no doubt Morrisons will be capable of achieving the same. Solidarity to you all here today. Furthermore, the current developments in union recognition legislation will provide workers in the private sector the ability to have their collective voice heard, so that workers across the private sector can not just grow in number, but grow in strength as well. We must be incredibly proud as an organisation of being on the brink of this achievement, and everyone who's been involved in bringing it about today here in this jurisdiction. Over the past year, of course, public sector workers have reminded us all not only of their dedication of public service, but that they remain essential before, during and after a pandemic. This was shown last summer in the brave actions of GFRS staff in tackling last summer's fire and the day-to-day heroic efforts of staff across the health and care sector, whether they be in the GHA, care agency, ERS, MEDOC, ADA, WeCare, First Choice, you name it. They are not forgotten. And despite workers going above and beyond for our community, we are reminded that both public and private employers in the healthcare sector must do better. Offering staff badges, grey texts, and nicely worded press releases does not go far enough. We have also had to remain vigilant against potential privatisations of services, and I'd like to thank the hard work of our ERS shop stewards team who have achieved exactly that. And going forward, we will remain just as vigilant to ensure that healthcare is for patients and not for profits in Gibraltar. Brothers and sisters, I'll leave you with this. Our workers' movement has always been defined in struggle, and we must continue to fight today to achieve a better tomorrow. Thank you to you all.
Brothers and sisters, it's once again a pleasure to be addressing you on International Workers' Day. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to everybody who's been involved in the organisation of today. Thank you for all of those who joined the march from the Morrison stall, and also thank you to the Musicians Union for collaborating with us today on this International Workers' Day. As you've heard from the other speakers, the cost of living crisis has dominated the public and private sector. The issues around the cost of living and pay continue to dominate what happens to our workers in Gibraltar, as we see with the prolonged dispute in Morrison's. We also continue to see issues of job insecurity. And workers continue to bear the brunt of spiralling prices, increase in inflation and pay restraints. And it's right that there are external factors that are driving the global cost of living crisis. The disaster that is Brexit is actually having an impact now on supply and is driving up prices. The empty promises that we had from Brexiteers as to the benefits of leaving the European Union have not been delivered. But Gibraltarians knew, 96% of you voted to remain in the European Union, and it's unfortunate that the UK did not follow Gibraltar's lead. We continue to have uncertainty around the treaty negotiations, and a deal, the right deal, is vital for Gibraltar and the future of Gibraltar. Of course, the war in Ukraine has also had an impact on global prices. And on International Workers' Day, I think it's right that we pause for workers in the Ukraine. The devastating impacts of that war on them, their families and their country. But it's too simplistic to say that Brexit and also the war in Ukraine are what is driving prices. We've heard from Sam earlier on about some of the underlying reasons. Companies are posting record profits. Millionaires are making more millions. Billionaires are making more billions. In the UK, the union has actually got behind the inflation figures to understand what are the underlying reasons for high inflation. And it is not increases in wages, it is profiteering by employers, increasing prices and enjoying record profits, whether in the banks, whether in the energy companies, and whether in supermarket retailers. But this is also happening in Gibraltar. At the budget speech in 2022, the Chief Minister reported that in the previous year, gross profits of employers here operating here in Gibraltar increased by 10.5%, whereas pay reduced by 4.6%. That's all it needs to tell you, that it is not increasing wages that are driving inflation, it is increased profits that are driving inflation. And remember, an inflationary increase is not a pay increase. An inflationary increase means that pay is only keeping up with price rises and keeping up with inflation. Any pay rise below inflation is a real terms cut in pay. And our members in Gibraltar are feeling the pinch on that now. That is starting to bite, it's hitting their pockets and hitting their spending power. Now, as Gillian said earlier on, against a backdrop of 3 years of no cost of living increases, the union, in conjunction with our members and our representatives, have embarked on a cost of living campaign. That cost of living campaign is being driven by an economic report that made the economic and financial case for a pay rise in Gibraltar and the need for a cost of living increase across the board. This has been driven by a team of shop stewards, activists, branch officials, conveners and officers. And as we've heard, it culminated in a public sector pay ballot, which was the single biggest engagement exercise we've had for a number of years, engaging and connecting with members across many workplaces across the whole of the public sector. And our members gave us a resounding turnout and gave us a resounding yes vote for industrial action if we cannot negotiate a cost of living increase that is acceptable to our members. And that strong mandate that's been given to negotiators is absolutely vital, and all involved in that campaign should be applauded. But the cost of living increase in the public sector is also important in terms of the private sector. Cost of living increases in the public sector drive pay in the private sector. They set a benchmark for pay increases in the private sector, and that's why the cost of living campaign in the public sector is as important to that sector as it is to the private sector. And we have been able to negotiate in the private sector a number of very competitive pay increases for our members. But too many workers in the private sector are faced with sub-inflationary pay increases or no pay increase at all. And this leads me on to Morrisons. What can I say about our members in Morrisons? I salute you. Our members have been on strike, as we've heard now, for over 3 months. This is in the face of a paltry pay award by Morrisons, which now means that the lowest paid workers in Morrisons are paid a mere 37 pence more than the minimum wage, which is a disgrace. It also means that our members working in Gibraltar, compared to their UK counterparts doing exactly the same job, are paid on average £2 an hour less. And again, this has to be remedied, and there has to be a resolution. But the bravery that our members have shown being out on strike for such a prolonged period of time is an inspiration to me, and it's an inspiration to our union. And as Christian has said, the support from Unite to our striking members in Morrisons is unwavering, and we will continue to support their fight, because their fight is our fight. I would ask our members and members of the public to please do visit the picket line at Morrisons and show your support, because it means an awful lot to them and gives them a huge boost if people are down there showing an interest in their dispute and showing an interest in their struggle. But Morrisons need to get back around the negotiating table. They need to find a resolution to this dispute. As Christian has said, we are prepared to engage. We're prepared to engage tomorrow. We're prepared to engage on Wednesday, and so on and so forth. It's fair pay, not low pay. Now, as we also heard from Sam, private sector employees and private sector workers have the opportunity to actually take control over their terms and conditions and their pay. On May Day 2022, I called on government, as the whole union did, to finally introduce into legislation the trade union recognition. We were delighted in January this year that government finally introduced that to meet a manifesto commitment that it made. So private sector workers now have the opportunity, with the support of Unite, to build organisation, to build membership, to obtain recognition and the rights to collectively bargain on their terms and conditions of employment. We have the legislation, it's now time that we used it. Finally, I've spoken about employment insecurity, and again, Sam touched on this slightly. We've made great strides in terms of dealing with employment insecurity, but we still have the scourge of 0 hours contracts alive and well in Gibraltar. These contracts have no place in a modern and progressive economy. These contracts only benefit employers. They give workers no certainty on pay, no certainty on hours. The only certainty they give is job insecurity. So Unite will be spending the rest of 2023 and beyond focusing on ridding Gibraltar of the scourge of these contracts. They have no place in Gibraltar. We should end 0 hours contracts now. And finally, I would like to thank all our members, our shop stewards, our activists, branch officials, conveners, officers and staff for everything that we've achieved in the last 12 months. Yes, we have much work to do, but in the meantime, enjoy May Day, enjoy the entertainment and solidarity.
A large contingent of the supporters in the crowd today were in fact Morrisons workers. So again, unsurprisingly, this dominated the themes of the speeches we heard today. It's now 3 months since they started their strike action.
Hello. Primero quiero dar las gracias. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. All right, I'm Roger. I'm shop steward at Morrison's. Thank you so much for Stuart. He coming, please. All right, all the work you doing, Christian, all the union, because it's not these people that's possible. Stay in the front of the Morrison 93 days. Only these people. Vale, one day more. You show to me, only people that strike the Morrison, que yo me quedaré y me quedaría todo el tiempo más que sea necesario, porque sois muy grandes. ¿Vale? De aquí le quiero dar un apelo muy grande a todos los trabajadores de Gibraltar, porque yo creo que es el momento, la altura, para los que todavía no son miembros de esta gran familia, que hagan el favor de hacerse miembros de esta familia. Esta es la solución para todos los trabajadores de Gibraltar y de la comunidad de Gibraltar. Ellos son la gran familia que tenemos que unirnos, ¿vale? Y quiero preguntar algo por aquí, que yo creo que no he visto a nadie. No hay nadie del gobierno de Gibraltar aquí representando. No hay nadie de la oposición de Gibraltar representando. Y es muy triste. Les digo por qué. Porque yo soy portugués, pero llevo 42 years en Gibraltar. Yo soy llanito ya. Yo soy inglés. En mi casa, all in my home, that 6 people foi voto this year. Son 6 personas que van a votar. Y 200 y pico que estamos delante del Morrison, de certeza que hay mucha gente más que va a votar. Simplemente el político en Gibraltar solo sirve para aparecer cuando necesita de un voto. Vos garantizo que dentro de poco, en la calle mía y de todos los que estamos aquí y los que no están, entonces sí, habrá un coche haciendo una propaganda y se acordarán que es el trabajador que los pone a donde están. No los que tienen mucho dinero. Gibraltar cada vez está peor. Los que mucho tienen, más tienen. Y el trabajador cada vez más. Es altura que todos se hagan miembros de esta gran familia y que lutemos por nuestros derechos y de nuestras familias. Thank you so much.
For the first time, we've heard from another organisation on May Day, the Musicians Association of Gibraltar, who have actually co-organised the May Day rally with Unite the Union.
Hello, good afternoon and happy May Day to everybody. My name's Kieran and I'm here representing the Musicians Association of Gibraltar. For anyone that doesn't know, we're actually a trade union with, representing musicians locally and also any local musician that may be playing outside Gibraltar. So the idea is to actually encourage people to support us so we can actually help everybody out there. Believe it or not, musicians are also workers and we also have rights. One thing a lot of people actually see is when the musicians perform. What a lot of people don't actually see is musicians for weeks and months before an event are preparing, and that is hours and hours and hours and hours of unpaid work. So can you imagine turning up for work and then having to do weeks and weeks and weeks of preparation without actually getting paid for it? And that is what a lot of musicians go through. And this is the one area that a lot of people don't actually see. The other thing is that a lot of people here in Gibraltar, this is an extra long weekend. They've all disappeared to Spain. They're all having a lovely time in Spain. They come back and they turn around to us and they say, lo hemos pasado bomba en la costa. No hemos hartado de vinito en el barcón y la musiquita abajo. But when it comes to Gibraltar, we are actually offended because we've got music in our own sort of area. Yeah? And I apologize for using this term, but we call it NIMBYs, not in my backyard. And that is exactly what happens in Gibraltar. it's not all negative. We actually want to thank the Ministry for Culture because they have supported us and they have helped us out since November 2019, which is when we constituted, and they have actually been able to help us to push forward and to push our message along. Well, the one thing that we do ask for in Gibraltar is a fair pay for musicians. Because at the end of the day, yes, you might think a musician is expensive if you actually hire one. But you have to factor in that they've got 3 months worth of rehearsals, which they're not getting paid for. They've got to spend hundreds, sometimes even thousands of pounds on instruments and equipment and stuff like that, which is not factored in for maybe charging you 150 or 200 pounds for a night. They might have actually spent 400 pounds in preparing for a £250 event. So those are the things that we want to put in place for our musicians here in Gibraltar. Thank you. We also want to be able to support the buy local mentality. There's a lot of events organisers in Gibraltar that look across the border to give them the support that they need, the sound, the lights, the electricity, etc., etc., etc. We have a lot of people in Gibraltar that actually can do this for us. We've got today, a particular example is Fresh, but there are other people. So the idea is, let's use the local community. It's not going to be more expensive than bringing them from Spain. It's going to cost us exactly the same amount. But for some reason, nos da coraje usar llanito. And that is a very, very unfortunate mentality that we have here in Gibraltar. And finally, all we want to do is to find the balance between what is good for the musician and the live events in Gibraltar to be able to help bring in the tourism, help bring in the local community to actually go out and enjoy all of this, and balance that out with what the people, giving the people their peace and the right of their peace to being in the homes. So it's really, really important that that comes together, and that will only come together by legislation, which we've been waiting for this particular law, and we've been waiting for the government to produce this law since the middle of last year. We're now in the middle of this year and they still haven't produced the law. So once that's produced, hopefully we can actually do something which brings everybody together, the local community, the musicians and the tourism, and the idea is it helps build a better Gibraltar for all of us. Thank you very much. Happy May Day.
There would have perhaps been a better turnout here today if Workers' Day had not fallen on a bank holiday Monday. But the union leaders and workers and members here today say they are committed and resolute that May Day celebrations will always be held on the 1st of May.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And this week, Unite the Union's Stuart Davis was interviewed on Gibraltar Today about the union's call for a cost of living increase for members of the public sector.
Good afternoon, Mr. Davis. Unite thinks that the government can afford a cost of living increase for members of the public sector then.
Afternoon, Jonathan. Well, indeed, the independent report that you've referenced actually makes the economic and financial case towards a cost of living increase, and that is in part around the ability of the government to actually borrow to fund that pay rise. We've had numerous conversations in respect of this subject, and I've said repeatedly that debt in itself is not an issue, and it shouldn't be something that necessarily we should be afraid of. When you look at funding that pay increase as well, automatically the cost of that is reduced because of the additional tax revenue that the government will get back from that. So the work that's been done by the economists that we commissioned to do the report simply states that yes,
this
it
is a
affordable.
report that we haven't yet seen. It hasn't been published.
It's not been published. I mean, it's not top secret, but it's not been published. And the contents of that report have driven the initial conversations and negotiations with government in respect of a cost of living increase.
So what exactly does it say about the affordability point?
Well, the affordability point is around the ability to borrow. I mean, it's around the economic stimulus that cost of living increase will actually provide. I mean, this is what we need to bear in mind, that with inflation ever increasing and the ability of individuals to spend being reduced, that is actually having an economic detriment and an economic impact. So actually by increasing wages within the public sector, and as we keep saying, that will have a positive bounce into the private sector as well, that you're actually increasing the spending power of individuals, you're increasing therefore the money going into the economy. And like I say, by simple nature of the tax system, the government will be receiving a proportion of that money back in any event.
So you'd expect the government to borrow more? Do you think that that's fair, that businesses would have to, the private sector would have to subsidise a private sector pay increase when they themselves cannot afford, in most cases, to pay their own employees more?
Well, again, that's the economic case. I mean, if individuals in the public sector are being paid more, then that is those individuals then being able to spend additional monies in the private sector. If you put more money in people's pockets, they can afford to spend more in terms of goods and services, in the hospitality sector, in terms of retailers. So it actually has that, beneficial flow through in relation to all parts of the economy. Simply, having pay restraints and not actually increasing wages does not work. And again, we've had this conversation before. We've had this conversation before via Viewpoint as well. That by stagnating wages, it will not be a stimulus to the economy. The stimulus to the economy is increasing wages. As we've said repeatedly, the inflationary spikes that we're seeing are not driven by wage increases, but by putting that additional money in people's pockets, they will be able to spend in the private sector, which will drive the private sector growth and will drive the stimulus for the economy to grow out of a post-COVID situation.
Okay, well, I'm sure that the private sector bodies will have something, they'll have a different approach to this conundrum of whether we can afford to put wages up in this cost of living crisis in the public sector and also in the private sector, public and private. But let me ask you a few adjacent points around May Day more generally. The day was, the rally was predominantly attended by Morrison's workers. Were you a little disappointed with the general turnout?
No, I was really pleased with the event yesterday. It was, it was the first time that we'd done it in conjunction with the Musicians Association, which worked really well from our perspective. And actually, we were delighted to be able to use May Day to centre on the dispute that we have with Morrison. So it was a really good day. Thanks to everybody who was involved in the organisation of it, 'cause it does take an awful lot of work to do that. So no, we were really pleased with the day and really pleased with the turnout.
Okay, and the association or the collaboration with the Musicians Association, that worked well? That might be something that can be repeated?
Yeah, I mean, again, we have to have those conversations, but my, the initial view is that it works really well, and we would like to kind of explore continuing that in terms of future May Day events.
Okay, and the ongoing pay dispute with the supermarket Morrisons, that's ongoing. They are refusing to return to the negotiating table, but you feel fairly confident in your position?
Well, our members have been on strike for over 3 months now, which is, quite extraordinary. And as I said yesterday, one that we should applaud them for their bravery, and being out on strike for this long is, is one that I take inspiration from, and also our union takes inspiration from. The position is that the union's support of our strikers is unwavering. The strikers are undeterred as well, and they are resolute in continuing that dispute. We are trying to open up those lines of communication with Morrison's to try and find a resolution to the dispute, because we don't want our members out on strike. I'm pretty sure that Morrison's don't want their workers out on strike, and I guess pretty much people in Gibraltar would like to see a resolution to that dispute. So really, we're calling on Morrison's to get back around the negotiating table to find a resolution, because we want our members back in work, but obviously on the right terms, with a resolution. Exactly.
All right, Unite the Union, Stuart Davies, thank you for joining us at Broadcasting House.
My pleasure.
Later in the week, GBC put Unite's proposal that the government should borrow to fund the public sector to the Chief Minister.
Well, let's be very clear. Every year, when the estimates book is circulated to other members of Parliament, it remains confidential. But I've said since COVID happened that I thought it was my obligation, the minute that we knew whether Gibraltar was in deficit or not for a particular year, that I should advise the people of Gibraltar of that. If we're in surplus and we're looking at those issues, then those things can be announced during the course of the budget debate. But if we're in deficit, that also must be announced immediately. And so I wanted to make sure, as I circulated the estimates book to opposition members and to members of the government, although we cannot debate that until the budget debate, it remains secret until then, it is important that people know that we ended the financial year 2022-2023 in a deficit. We're now talking about a different financial year, 23-24. I'm talking to the unions about what we should do in the context of how the cost of living has increased as a result of the war in Ukraine in the past 18 months, how we should take that forward in a way that addresses the necessity that some people in the public sector may have because of their lower earnings to have some element of assistance from the government as an employer. That negotiation is ongoing. The unions are doing very good work with the government. We have a very open channel of communication. We're working together to try and achieve joint aims of protecting those who most need it. I know that the union would like to see, some of the unions would like to see a sort of public sector-wide pay increase. This negotiation will be resolved in, I hope, a way that delivers a consensus and a mutual agreement, and that agreement will be announced during the course of the budget debates. Now, in principle, I will not support borrowing more to pay people who do not need the money. But if you ask me as a socialist, in the context of people needing support, those who really, really need support, that's not the public sector as a whole, those who really need support, of course, if it were necessary, I would take more borrowing to help them, but not for the public sector as a whole.
Okay, but Unite says it's commissioned this independent report. We haven't seen it yet, and it says the government can well afford to take on more debt and that it wouldn't be a problem.
Well, Unite have shared that report with me. As you can imagine, I don't agree with many of the premises on which the report is based. I don't agree with many of the assertions as to the reality of the public finances of Gibraltar, or indeed what life is like in Gibraltar, whether it's more expensive or cheaper to live in Gibraltar than it is to live in the United Kingdom. The government has an analysis of that we update every year. We think that the report is flawed. I've shared those views with Unite the Union when we've discussed the report, but that doesn't mean that we cannot come to a negotiated outcome between the government, Unite the Union, the GGCA and the Teachers Union, which deals with public sector issues, in particular those who are in need in the public sector as a result of the increased cost of living, and in a way that can be seen as a consensus, which is what I would like to be able to announce going forward.
Well, Unite's Stuart Davis has a hypothesis that the government will be receiving a portion of that money back anyway and that it would stimulate the economy.
Well, that's not a hypothesis. That is actually, of course, entirely true. It's the position that the people who were fighting for parity, Joe Bossano being one of the leading lights there, was asserting at the time that the parity came to Gibraltar. This is not just a payment out by the MOD and the government of Gibraltar. It's also an increased salary which produces an increased return to the government in taxation. But one does not compensate for the other. So if I give you an extra £1, yes, of course, you will pay me the extra, for example, 24 pence in the pound that you might pay in taxation. I'll get an extra 24 pence, but I'm putting out an extra 76 pence. And that is an issue that, of course, can be balanced. And I'll tell you that my good friend Stuart is, of course, right, but he's not completely right. And he doesn't compensate for the other amount of money that will go out of the public coffers, which should go out in the public coffers, as we've shown in the years that we've been in surplus. And we've spread the wealth that Gibraltar has generated, in particular with those in the public sector. And we would want to do if we were to be in surplus again next year.
Well, you do both have different positions on this at this moment. Do you think you can come together with an agreement? Because Unite have said that they do have a mandate for industrial action.
And the government has a mandate not to agree a pay increase across the public sector, because that would be to increase debt. And one of the golden rules that the GSLP takes to a general election is that we will not borrow to pay recurrent expenditure. Then COVID happens and we have to borrow to pay recurrent expenditure, because that is a new moment that we have to address. So look, we've both got a mandate to sit down at the table and argue hammer and tongs until we can come to a consensus agreement, which I hope will work for everyone.
So it seems clear, no pay rise across the public sector, but potential help for those who really need it.
I think what is clear is that we're going to sit down to try and reach a consensus that enables us all to satisfy the things that we are genuinely defending, because they matter to us, because they are genuinely the right thing to defend: the integrity of the public purse, turning Gibraltar back into surplus, moving away from deficit, and that what none of us must do is to fall into the trap of answering questions like that in the way that you want me to answer, which is yes or no, when we want to move forward in a way that delivers consensus and the best for everyone who works in the public sector and everyone who is responsible for the public finances in Gibraltar. But good try.
The bank holiday weekend began with dignitaries laying wreaths for Workers' Memorial Day at the Alameda Gardens. The Chief Minister said this day would always take a priority, while Unite the Union called for health and safety laws to be enforced throughout the private sector.
So look, you've seen a lot of ministers of the government here. I'm here today to recommit our support to Unite the Union's campaign for health and safety at work. But this is not just a union campaign. The government of Gibraltar, since I became Chief Minister, committed itself to ensuring that the 28th of April, which is International Day for ensuring that we remember the dead and we fight for the living, Workers' Memorial Day, is commemorated in Gibraltar every year with a bank holiday. And of course, people are out with their families, enjoying themselves. That's what we want a bank holiday for working people to be able to have another day off with their families. But it's important that we come here and we recommit, those of us who are truly committed to the cause of protecting workers' rights, not those of us who just talk about the stuff on social media because it might be convenient in an election year, those of us who are really committed. And that's why I'm here to recommit the government to this cause, to ensure that we continue to work with Unite the Union and other workplace representatives to protect people at work, both in terms of physical issues and physical injuries and mental issues, which are just as important and can have such a negative effect on people. So this year in particular, I want to recommit to the anti-bullying policy in the government and at work throughout.
Gillian, you've called for the laws regarding safety at work to be policed. Tell us why you feel that they aren't.
Well, it's not that they're not policed, but I believe that now, taking into account that the East Side projects are just going to start, there are going to be lots of construction companies. Unfortunately, like we all know, the construction companies is one of the highest risk or the highest risk industry, and we need no accidents to happen, and we need full enforcement of a law whereby all those construction workers' lives are safe.
And what sort of a response have you received so far from the government on this particular issue?
Well, basically, when we started back in 2016 with the policy A and B in the introduction into government, it was all with a plan ahead that this was now transpired onto the private sector at large. So therefore, government has been on board since day one when we started doing the policies together, and obviously with the aim that the private sector also implement them.
You heard that Unite the Union talk about a commitment to policing laws in the private sector. Tell us your thoughts on that.
So what Unite are asking for is to change the way that we do the regulation of health and safety in the private sector, in particular in the construction industry. I think there is an important issue there. I think we have to work with Unite to come up with a joint position from the government and from the union so that we can together enforce that, both with the enforcement arm of the government, the factories, inspectors, etc., and with the union's eyes on the ground to ensure that whatever it is that we have decided is the right and safe system of work to deploy in a private construction site, and what the health and safety systems to be deployed to ensure that are being observed in every construction site in Gibraltar.